These days, it's far from unusual to enjoy a home-cooked dinner inspired by a TV chef, stop at the drive-thru of a fast food joint, or celebrate a special occasion at a fancy restaurant. But we rarely stop to consider the people who came up with all of those things. So today, we're going to take a look at some people we never realized shaped how we eat. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. And after that, please leave a comment and let us know what other food influencers you would like to hear about. Okay, time to take a look at some famous foodies. Julia Child was a badass of the highest order. She tried to join the military during World War II, but was turned down for being too tall. A lot of people would have just moved on at that point, but Julia really wanted in on that war. So she joined the Office of Strategic Services, a precursor agency to the CIA, as a typist. Over time, however, she worked her way up the ladder, eventually doing things like creating a shark repellent that stops them from setting off underwater bombs. Because the only thing worse than a shark that explodes before its time is a bomb that explodes before its time. She also met Paul Cushing Child, an OSS employee, who would become her husband and introduce her to cooking. She turned out to be a fast learner, and in 1961, she released Mastering the Art of French Cooking. The recipe book brought a practical method of cooking French food to American homes and thrust her into the spotlight to become the pioneer of TV cook show hosts. The American-born, French-trained chef first appeared on a television show called I've Been Reading to promote her cookbook in 1961. Instead of sitting down for a normal interview, Child brought a hot plate, a whisk, and eggs on set with her and cooked an omelet during the broadcast. Every talk show guest should take notes. Viewers loved the episode and wrote to the producers asking to see more of Child. By February 1963, Child had her own cooking show on the WGBH network. The French chef also introduced closed captioning for hearing-impaired audiences for the first time, and in case you can't hear the TV over your chewing.
This is Julia Child. Bon appetit!
If you ever get a time machine and you're into eating out, don't go to any era earlier than the mid to late 1800s, because that's when the idea of a restaurant where you sit down got started. At the time, most people didn't understand why anyone would choose to eat away from home if they didn't absolutely have to. And taverns and inns were the only places that hired a cooking staff. Kitchens were cramped, grimy places where cooks worked in hot, windowless rooms with wood and coal-burning stoves, often drinking wine to stay hydrated. But French chef Auguste Escoffier changed that, refusing to allow his cooks to drink anything other than malt brew to keep them sober as they worked with sharp utensils. He also introduced a la carte menus and created more than 5,000 recipes during his career, from foie gras to canned tomato sauce. And apparently, because he had some kind of disease that wouldn't let him stop innovating, Escoffier also introduced the first cooking assembly line, where each worker had a different station designed to perform a specific task. This made cooking a much more pleasant and economical experience, and allowed restaurants to turn higher profits. It's a model that would be perfected by the McDonald's brothers over a century later, to the delight of salt enthusiasts all over the world. When Upton Sinclair began interviewing workers in a Chicago area meatpacking plant in the early 1900s, he intended to expose the harsh realities that many immigrant workers faced in the meatpacking industry. He was passionate about bringing attention to the grim conditions workers were forced to deal with, and he believed in the power of the press to spread his message to the world. Which it only sort of did. His book, The Jungle, published in 1906, was a work of fiction based on the 7 weeks he spent investigating and conducting interviews at Chicago's Union stockyards. And its plot centered on the relentless working conditions a Lithuanian immigrant endured to provide for his family. But instead of stirring outrage for better working conditions, the exposé drew more attention to the unsanitary conditions at factories where U.S. meat was processed. Which is to say, it seriously grossed everyone out, and rightfully so. After the public heard stories of meat dropping to a sawdust floor, only to be nibbled on by rats before it was picked up and packaged, as well as other stomach-churning tales, the government was forced to investigate. Realizing the author's claims were true, Congress went to work immediately to ensure the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. They didn't do anything for the workers Sinclair had intended to help, though, causing him to later note, "I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." Hey, that happens to us in Call of Duty all the time too, buddy. Before he was the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson served as a U.S. minister to France. And while living in Paris from 1784 to 1789, he brought one of his enslaved workers, James Hemings, with him to be trained as a French chef. Jefferson told Hemmings if he would learn the art of French cooking and bring his acquired skills back to Jefferson's Virginia home of Monticello, he would be freed after teaching an apprentice the craft. Gee, thanks. The salary would be nice too, TJ. That turned out to be a pretty good incentive, and Hemmings brought a number of signature dishes back to the United States upon their return. Those included macaroni and cheese, ice cream, whipped cream, and French fries. Apparently, 18th century France was ordering entirely from the kids' menu. Jefferson, for his part, kept his word and freed Hemmings in 1796, but sadly, he perished just 5 years later. Ever eat at Benihana and wonder if all Japanese chefs are that entertaining when they cook? Well, they're not. It all started when Rocky Aoki approached his father in the 1960s about purchasing a 4-table Japanese teppanyaki restaurant in Manhattan. Yunosuke Aoki had opened his own restaurant, Benihana, in Japan during World War II, but he didn't think the business model would last in New York. He believed that Americans would need a show to keep them in their seats long enough to enjoy a Japanese meal. And his son heard what he was saying.
Idea from Japan 300 years ago, but I just made the table much bigger and put the showmanship, put the chef in front of a customer.
Rocky encouraged his tableside chefs at his Benihana restaurant to put on the best spectacle they could. This included juggling eggs, cracking jokes, setting fire to onion volcanoes, and preparing full meals in front of guests. Benihana drew rave reviews, and prom dates have never been the same. Like so many of us, food innovator William A. Mitchell got his start monitoring the sugar crystallization tanks for the American Sugar Beet Company when he was just a teenager. And after that, he never really left the sugary food industry. He developed a substitute for tapioca to help keep soldiers full during World War II, a project presumably codenamed Operation Dessert Storm. Then in 1956, Mitchell attempted to invent a self-carbonating soda and completely failed. But being a turn lemons into lemonade kind of guy, he repurposed the key ingredient and marketed it as Pop Rocks. By 1957, he had created a sweet powder drink that was high in nutrients for NASA, Tang. The astronauts of the Apollo program weren't huge fans of Tang, but consumers, who were obsessed with all things space-related at the time, loved the idea of having a space-worthy treat available in their local stores. It's the next best thing to going to the moon, without the threat of explosive decompression. In 1967, he developed gelatin that congealed with cold water, setting the pace for what would later be recognized across the country as quick-set Jell-O. He had also developed a dairy-free alternative to whipped cream, Cool Whip, the same year. Cool Whip, Jell-O, Pop Rocks, and Tang. The man had more influence over the eating habits of generations of children than their parents did. The 1920s saw automobiles becoming the ultimate status symbol, which is to say, everyone was a car nut. And with more people on the road, Texas entrepreneur Jesse G. Kirby saw dollar signs. In 1921, he opened the first drive-in restaurant, Pig Stand, with servers who brought food directly to the patron's car. The Fort Worth-based restaurant quickly became a hit as new car owners got to experience the ultimate luxury of getting ketchup stains on their seats. American culture would never be the same again. After the first Pig Stand proved successful, Kirby opened a second location closer to Dallas. So technically, the restaurateur can also be credited for creating the first American restaurant chain. Applebee's owes him a debt. In the late 1940s, Chinese food had become all the rage in America. Restaurants were serving up chop suey and chow mein across the nation, but the frozen and canned food industries had yet to create a product that lived up to the real thing. So Gino Paolucci and his mother Michelina created their own version of a freezable, sellable Chinese dish. And soon, his mother's chop suey recipe, flavored with traditional Italian spices, hit the grocery store aisles to profitable results. Because frozen pizza was also growing in popularity, the entrepreneur felt that further melding the two cuisines could be a revolutionary idea. He was absolutely right because he invented pizza egg rolls. Gino's pizza rolls hit the market in 1968 and have remained a popular and convenient frozen food staple ever since. Long may he reign.
You know how good the Ginos are, so what's the matter, you? Hey!
Unlike most food mascots like Uncle Ben, Betty Crocker, and Diggum the Honey Smacks Frog, Chef Boyardee was a real person. In fact, he was actually a classically trained Italian chef who opened his own restaurant before he ever stuffed a single ravioli into a can.
Hello, may I come in? I am Chef Boyardee.
Ettore Boyardee, who actually spelled his name Boyardi, found his first job as a hotel chef's apprentice when he was only 11 years old. After training in Paris and London under highly esteemed chefs, Boyardee immigrated to the US and found work as the head chef at the Plaza Hotel in New York, which was a huge deal back then. He eventually made his way to Cleveland, where he worked at the Winton Hotel before opening his own restaurant, Il Giardino d'Italia. Patrons loved his food so much they lined up around the block to get a taste of his famous Italian cooking. Soon, the chef began filling milk bottles with his signature sauce for people to take home with them. Hopefully, the bottles were clean. It wasn't long before Chef Boyardee offered full meal kits that were so popular he needed to open a separate processing plant. And in 1928, the official Chef Boyardee brand, now spelled phonetically so Americans couldn't get it wrong, was launched. Over the years, his canned Italian classics reached shelves across America, and his name is practically synonymous with a type of canned pasta. Molto bene. You probably remember studying the food pyramid when you were a kid and may have assumed it was invented by some kind of food scientist. But it all started when the Swedish government set out to create a nutrition model that would help citizens cope with the high food prices of the 1970s. By determining which foods were essential and which ones were full of nutrients but not necessary to eat in large quantities, officials hoped the information would serve as a guide for grocery shoppers looking to save money. It was like a Kelly Blue Book for groceries. Swedish home economics teacher Anna-Britt Ungseder, wisely realizing that a visual model would make the whole thing way easier to follow, placed the information in an easy-to-follow pyramid guide with recommended servings of each group of food. But the Swedish pyramid is different from the various food pyramids in the US. In effort to appease large food manufacturers, the USDA's pyramid at one point allowed for 6 to 11 servings of bread a day, which is much, much higher than what's recommended by experts. They also allowed the dairy industry to implement an entire section dedicated to its products because, hey, why not? Somebody's got to drink all that milk. So what do you think? Who else shaped the way we eat? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.